Cheers, guys, and welcome to Uncle Scott's PANCAST. Little Vino Rosso today. In the old PANCAST, we're going to talk about Lodge cast iron skillets. We're going to go through some feedback and answer some questions about that how to slide an egg video I did a week or so ago. Go through a little feedback on this guy. This is a Duparquet mineral B carbon steel. Talk a little bit about carbon steel seasoning. We're going to talk a little bit about California olive ranch olive oil. Got an update on the Sous Vide controversy or lack thereof and more. Let's jump in and get started. Now, a couple weeks ago in the last PANCAST, I mentioned this guy. This is an 11-inch, kind of a somewhat unique size, Lodge cast iron skillet. I found it at Costco for less than 20 bucks, and it comes with a little silicone handle protector. Since that video, I've now taken this pan on 2 different camping trips, about 5 days of camping, and I like it. I really like Lodge stuff for outdoors cooking, camping stuff especially, and I think at under 20 bucks, the performance is there, and it definitely gets a thumbs up on that deal, kind of a screaming deal, in my opinion. However, I do want to point out a couple of things about the pan. I've got a 10-inch Lodge, and I've got a 12-inch Lodge, and obviously the 11 fits in between. If we all remember back to our high school geometry, I did a little bit of square inch area of a circle comparison here. The 10-inch pan, 78 square inches of cooking surface, and I know this is not exact. I know I'm not taking into account the width of the rims and the angle of the sides. I'm talking in just round numbers here. 10-incher, 78 square inches of cooking surface, 11-inch, 95 square inches, and a 12-inch up to 113 square inches. So between the 10 and the 12, just a 2-inch difference in diameter, but almost 50% more cooking surface in the 12 versus the 10. So that's kind of interesting. Now also there's a problem with camping cooking. I don't know if you guys run into this. We have a smaller travel trailer. It has a 2-burner cooktop, I guess you'd call it in there, a small installed stove there. And the burners are very small. I also have Coleman stoves, various camp stoves. Same problem there. You get a small burner and the flame is absolutely thermonuclear. One sip of wine and it's Happy New Year. But the flame and the heat is absolutely thermonuclear right above that burner, but out a couple of inches, it's relatively cool. So what I decided to do was take this guy, and this is, you may have seen it in some of my older videos, this is a Duparquet, very thick copper diffuser plate, pretty heavy, and I know when you go camping, usually weight and extra junk, you don't want to carry too much extra stuff. But I found this thing to be very helpful. Here I'm cooking some fajitas in the 11-inch pan. And yes, I do note that that is some Mauviel French cookware there to the right, a little saucepan there. I am roughing it, not taking the copper, making do with the stainless steel. But in the 11-inch, I got good searing and good sizzling in this guy edge to edge when using that diffuser plate. So I think it was well worth an addition, even though it probably cuts down on gas mileage and it's a little bit extra junk. Definitely worth taking a copper diffuser plate when you're doing some cooking in your RV or on a camp stove. Also camping cooking related, I always carry olive oil. I was on the California Olive Ranch website the other day. They had a big sale and sent a text link, so I jumped on that. But I noticed now they are carrying their olive oil in these, I'd almost say like a wine box. It's actually an olive oil box. And so you can take your empty glass bottles and refill those. I usually take one of these camping, but again, this is big and heavy. It's also prone to breaking if you're going down any rough Forest Service roads. And I noticed what they also had are these. And these are little aluminum olive oil bottles. So not going to break. It's a little bit smaller and lighter than the glass bottle. And I thought these guys were really good for carrying on a camping trip. Okay, the sous vide controversy. A couple weeks ago I mentioned that I have no interest whatsoever in sous vide. Many people agree with me. However, a somewhat vocal contingent has been just absolutely pounding on me about the benefits of sous vide. And I've been taking a whooping online for a couple weeks now. Thank goodness for Dennis Sikra. I may be mispronouncing that, but he sent in a photo of something his son had created, and I think maybe we can all come together and hug this out and sing Kumbaya over this. His son is using the sous vide circulator in an ice water bath to rapidly chill cans of beer. I'm going to bless this, and maybe sous vide not so bad after all. Okay, I put up a big review of this Duparquet 9.5-inch mineral B carbon steel frying pan. Quick Duparquet note before we get into some of the feedback. I talked to them. If you remember a couple months ago, we mentioned Pebbly. That is a sister company that Duparquet had launched, some kind of high-end kitchenware. They have launched yet another sister company. This one is called 32 Dumas, D-U-M-A-S, but it's pronounced Dumas. And they are a French cutlery knife manufacturer. And I have not tried one of these yet. They're not a sponsor. But if you guys have tried one of the 32 Dumas knives, let me know, and I'll see if I can get one and check it out. But yet another sister company launched by Duparquet. Check them out if you get a chance. Okay, let's jump into some of the questions and feedback I got on the video review of this guy. Also on that how to slide an egg in a carbon steel skillet video in which this skillet was heavily featured. Let's see, Ron Jenkins, 4257, wants to know, when I slid those eggs, was I using salted or unsalted butter? I don't think it matters very much, but I was using salted. Usually have a Butterbell crock we keep on the counter near the toaster, and that's always got salted butter in it. Let's see, John C. wants to know, and one of the egg sliding tips, the very first thing is take your eggs out of the fridge, let them warm up. Room temperature is a great temperature for an egg to put into a pan. John C. says, so what you mean to tell me is that if the egg was straight from the fridge, it would have stuck, even on a well-seasoned pan. I laid out 5 factors in that video for how to slide an egg, and every one of them is important. If you screw any of the 5 factors up, your eggs can stick. So they are all important. See, Gardening and Growing 6357 wrote in and says, I don't know if it's a he or she, says, I have a Duparquet Pro carbon steel omelet pan, and what he does is put a few drops of oil in the pan and then puts in the butter. So you can definitely do that. You can use oil and butter at the same time, and I think I showed that in that carbon steel omelet pan review. I used peanut oil and actually a little bit of clarified butter. If you're having trouble sliding your eggs at first and want to use oil and butter, what you can do is use clarified butter, and you get a little bit more wiggle room because you've kind of removed those butter, fat, milk solids, and they won't brown up. They're not in there anymore, and you get a little bit more wiggle room and time with that heat if you use oil and clarified butter. Not sure how to pronounce this. Mulikainen wrote in, said he bought this pan, same pan 4 years ago, and he's not used another pan since. He loves it and says it's perfect size for a single guy. He seasoned it one time and he cooks with it every day. I really like to hear that, and I always do kind of like the reality check. Sometimes I wonder, am I in my own little carbon steel cooking bubble here, and I review something and it's all my opinion and I put it out there, and it's always nice if other people have real world opinions that kind of back that up. So that's nice to hear from Mulikainen. Mike Holt, 6920 said so. What a screen name. Said he appreciated the part I left in the video unedited where part of my French omelet stuck. What you see around here is what you get. Try to be as genuine and authentic as possible, and sometimes I stick an egg. Everybody does it, especially when a pan is new. And I'm learning it. I'm learning what burner it likes, how long to preheat it, what temperature to preheat it at. Everybody sticks an egg or two early on. Once you get going and cook a few in it, your egg sticking rate should drop precipitously once you get the hang of it. Let's see, Isabel 6851 wrote in also about sliding fried eggs and said she's been using a laser thermometer and wants to use that to check the temperature of the pan and is wondering the exact temperature of my pan when I add the eggs. I don't know exactly to the degree what the temperature is, but as I noted, once you put the butter in the pan, when you're going to fry an egg, that water content of the butter regulates the temperature of the pan. It evaporates and boils at 212 at sea level. And if there's still liquid water in there boiling away, you know the pan is somewhere right around 212. Then once that boils away, the temperature of the pan starts to rise. So I would say my eggs, I'm just guessing here, they go in somewhere between 220 and 230. And those laser thermometers, I use those, but I use them on a relative basis. I don't use them to be completely exact because you have to take into account emissivity. I can't remember the exact term, but a little bit of the readings depend on the shininess of the metal. And when you put butter in a pan and kind of get that coated around there, it kind of changes the shininess of the metal. So when you get that in there, the laser temperature, laser thermometers may not be 100% accurate. It depends on how you have them set. But on a relative basis, I can tell if the laser temperature says it's 250 degrees and then a few minutes later it's 280, I know the pan temperature has gone way up, even though it may not be precise to the degree. The carbon steel seasoning question, TG Delios wrote in and asked if I apply seasoning to the underside of a carbon steel pan to prevent rusting. I typically don't worry too much about it. After I've used a pan and cleaned it and let it cool down, when I apply those couple of drops of protective oil, of course I wipe it all around the cooking surface. I wipe that around the entire pan, including the bottom, not the handle, but the entire pan, including the bottom. And usually that is enough to prevent rusting, even though I don't do a dedicated seasoning on the bottom of the carbon steels. FD4340 writes in and asks, does it make sense to buy a carbon steel pan if you had the same size in a cast iron? I'm not sure if I'm typical or not, but you can see right here, I like cast iron and I like my carbon steels. I like having both. I think maybe the cast irons, they're a little bit more perhaps rugged for camping and outdoor type purposes. I also really like them for things like cornbread. I think the more vertical sidewalls really do a better job with cornbread. For sliding eggs, I like the carbon steel better. And for steaks, I end up using the carbon steel. I would say just based on the amount I use, the carbon steel versus the cast iron, I definitely use the carbon steel more for searing steaks, although you can do just as good a job with the cast iron. So I like having both. And as long as your wife will let you, that's what I recommend. And finally today we are going to raise a glass to Bob Barker. Bob passed away, sadly, this past week. When I was a little kid and got a cold and stayed home from school, I had my chicken soup and my ginger ale and my crackers, and my mom would let me watch TV. So I watched a lot of Price is Right back in the day when I was a little fella and not feeling too well. I used to watch Match Game, and that's where I learned that Gene Rayburn and Charles Nelson Riley, true Hollywood stars. But I always enjoyed Price is Right and Bob Barker. So we're sad to see him go, and we raise a glass to Bob Barker. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again next time on Uncle Scott's PANCAST.